Get ready to focus on yourself because it's time for Learn to Play Silver. Last time, we discussed economy and how it is easy to escape bronze by safely and reliably gaining experience for your team. Now in silver, it's your job to take those raw resources and turn them into a victory. Climbing through silver is about production, what you produce out of your cooldowns, mana, objective rewards, your level leads, and what you do in between those factors. Silver makes up 35% of the player base. With such a large demographic, this league is full of players of different skill, commitment, and game knowledge levels. I will be using some vocabulary throughout this video. Realize you should be applying these ideas to yourself first and foremost. We are going to interact with our team. We are going to help lead them to victory. Their execution is not your concern. Your main concern in silver is to produce high-value plays and turn those into a team's call to action. Your level 10 heroic ability is the best and most impactful example of this. Here, Raynor has diligently soaked the early game. He has joined the early objectives. His communication and body language have told everyone that he is a team player. And upon reaching level 10, he's going to receive a power spike. This power spike is a new ability, Hyperion, and it's our next job to figure out how to maximize its value and impact on the battlefield. Deducing value is very easy to do when you understand the full text of an ability. Here, Raynor is rather mana efficient, so we're not concerning ourselves with the mana. The cooldown is about once every 2 minutes, meaning this ability has to be extremely impactful every time it's cast because the limited number of times we'll be able to cast it over a match. Order the Hyperion to make a strafing run dealing damage, hitting 4 targets. This means when I cast Hyperion, I want to make sure there are at least 4 enemy targets in the area. This effect lasts 12 seconds, but it also fires a cannon on structures, dealing massive damage. This already has given us a lot of value to work with. We know we want a fight that lasts at least 12 seconds. We want there to be about 4 enemy targets for it. It'd be nice if it included structures, and because it's such a long cooldown, we want it to be a call to action. We want allies to see the ability, react to the duration of it, and fight hard until it's over. Now that we've developed some criteria to analyze the value of my Hyperion cast, let's see how I did. Your first heroic should be used swiftly after pickup to make sure you're on a good rotation for the rest of the match. Remember, your very first heroic will set your allies' perception of you for the rest of the game, so make sure it's good. Let's now analyze it in full and see if it matched the criteria. We are moving into the objective, and Rhaegar puts out his bloodlust. Immediately, the call to action has been made by another player. Players under the effect of bloodlust want to attack each other, so we can ride that, stack our ult on top of it to increase both of their values together. ETC puts out a mosh pit, so I position myself to put a penetrating round and ruin that particular skill. Hyperion is now in play. It is traveling northeast, covering the main escape of the enemy team, the enemy gate, as well as landing on top of the buildings. We have succeeded in our first goal of casting it in a fight that's going to last about 12 seconds. To avoid the area of the Hyperion, they would have to take unoptimized pathing and ultimately escape slower than they otherwise would using the Hyperion's path. We got 3 targets here with some buildings coming up. Maybe some lane minions will appear. Either way, we have succeeded in reaching a base number of targets that allow for a decent value for this spellcast. Towards the end of its cast, the Hyperion locks onto some structures, so we get a minor checkmark here for including a structure and doing that bonus damage. Last but not least, the allies were inspired to fight forward, walk past the tank, and continue pursuing the enemy squishies. With the help of Rhaegar's Bloodlust in the early part, we created a call to action. With your heroic on cooldown, it is now time to think about your personal rotation. What are you going to do during your ult's cooldown to enable your next ult cast to be powerful? What resources are you going to create in the background so you have an advantage for your next big team fight? Basically, from here on out, I'm trying to find as many opportunities to cast as many Hyperions as possible for high value. Here, I am still on cooldown, so I'm taking a bit of a risk in the mid-game by pushing out with Rhaegar. If I were to die in this fight, I would still be on cooldown for Hyperion, and I wouldn't lose any value on that cast. Sadly, though, my Rhaegar and my Anubarak die, leaving me without a team fight to cast a Hyperion over. So I'm forced to wait on the cast. My goal is now to put myself in another position where I can participate as full as possible. Maybe I can be a part of this Greymane kill. But when Johanna wanders off, I realize I don't have the team fight potential to make my Hyperion a fight that'll last for 12 seconds. So I head north. Right now, we are about 30 seconds into my Hyperion being off cooldown. This means if this happens 3 more times throughout the match, I have missed out on a whole Hyperion's worth of contribution for my team. Getting rid of this Hyperion and using it in a high value situation is paramount at this point. And we can start to avoid some of our other value goals in order to get this rotation rolling again. Here, ETC and Jaina are poking the objective. I have no tank to keep Jaina from doing high amounts of damage to my support and burst. So I, as Raynor, have kind of taken over the tank role since I have a self-heal in this small skirmish. Here, I choose to use my Hyperion to delete the Jaina. Obviously, not a high value use of the ability. There was no team fight. There weren't 4 targets. I did manage to include a structure, and I was able to remove Jaina from the field, which allowed my allies to safely take the objective. However, because the objective is currently ticking, I know I will have another Hyperion in 100 seconds available for that next objective. By holding off on casting it here, I may have had to wait the entirety of the time to the next objective before I had a decent use of Hyperion. When you choose to cast suboptimal spells, think about why you're trading that spell for the value you're getting. Here, I am trading for a delete on Arthas to protect my very weak fort. The most I am getting is 2 kills for my team. We now have map control, but it'd be our job to make use of that. Here in this cast, I am trading a 2 out of 4 value to protect the backline there. Rhaegar, Anubarak are up towards the top of the map, and Hyperion heading that direction guards them from further fights going that way. My final Hyperion of this match is a good example of informed aggression, something you will need to master on your way to gold. Here, looking at the minimap, I can see I have a 3v3 fight. I am a level up, and I have my heal available along with the Hyperion. Because I'm level 20, I have power greater than that of my enemies, 4% per level, plus my level 20 talent pick that has empowered my Hyperion. You may see streamers, pro players, or others refer to this as getting stupid. What they're really saying is that we are avoiding optimal play because we are more powerful and we can just be bullheaded about our execution and cause the enemy to make a mistake. This fight was so loud that Johanna was brought into the action. Rhaegar continued to fight in a defense he was losing. Kael'thas ran for it, but Raynor had enough health plus his survivability allowed him to tank this fight until the rest of the team showed up. It was missing a structure, but we traded that value for the Jaina kill and ultimately the call that was put out to the team that motivated us to group up and complete this game. Some heroics are even simpler to use, but we want to make sure we still pursue that value. Phoenix, for example, has a shorter cooldown, meaning it's available nearly every fight, not just for objectives. It deals damage along the way to its resting point, so make sure you cast through the target so you get this initial burst damage. After that, it sticks around for 7 seconds, dealing damage and splashing, so we want to favor an area that has multiple targets where this damage will splash onto the nearby characters. Here's a good value exchange on my Phoenix. It flies through both targets, getting that initial damage. If ETC didn't show up, the Phoenix would have still had a target, the fort, for the rest of its duration. This objective is now ours. I traded my ultimate for the enemy objective clear, Gul'dan. Greymane was seen in the bottom. With this objective safely in our control, all my focus is now on my next heroic cast. I have 30 seconds to decide where my Phoenix is going to go. Likely right on top of the Punisher during the push. With melee characters, my call to action is even more important because I am exposed while doing my damage in melee range. Kerrigan has the feature where her damage becomes shielding for her. Maelstrom puts out damage in an area effect. This means if I'm on top of the enemy, I will get maximum survivability. This ability lasts for 7 seconds, but because it is instant with melee range, we want to make sure that it is clearly communicated to our allies what we intend to do for the duration of this ability. Much like our Hyperion, we want to encourage people to fight inside of it and give them an obvious call to action. Your melee characters can also do this, but it's usually in conjunction with their other abilities. My first heroic cast needs to be clear and decisive. To do this, I'm going to combine Maelstrom with my Q, Ravage, to create a visual show of who I am the aggressor towards. Once my team sees me make this motion, they are able to take time and react to the sound cue and the visual cue that I have provided them. As a dive character, Chromie is one of my main targets here, next to Stukov. She is my jurisdiction. By killing her and targeting her in this very first fight, I have communicated my future job to my team, and as we have more fights, I can continue to build that role. My ult was instant in activation. It was more quiet, but because of my execution on it, my team was able to easily read into what my intentions were, and then I followed them through. It is now my job as Kerrigan to communicate clearly with pings and body language that I want to grab these objectives and play it safe until my next heroic is ready. Use your pings to communicate a good rotation with your allies. You do not want to pick fights while you are on cooldown for your heroic. Do this after your very first heroic cast. As soon as your ult is done, hold down the Alt key and left click to get an alert to your allies. They will also be able to see this information in the top bar, but this begins that dialogue. Make sure you're the one informing them of this. Do it after the first one. Do it as you get closer, but let this dialogue be natural, not something that comes after a death or after a mistake. Let's take a moment to summarize everything we've discussed so far. In dealing with heroics, we talked about using the full text, casting as many heroics as possible over the course of a match. And if you aren't making the ultimate value choice, acknowledge what you are trading your heroic for. Begin applying these rules to your basic abilities as well. Identify the full text and what optimizes them. For example, Vala's Vault causes an empowered basic attack right after she performs the vault. If you vault backwards, you will miss out on the 2-second window you have to cast this increased damage spell. If you vault sideways, you may dodge that blizzard while still being in range to engage with your bonus empowered attack. Now that you've cast your high value heroic, it's time to start prepping for the next one. Create more resources so you are more powerful by the time of your next cast. Play safe while on cooldown, soak, and ping your ability to communicate clearly to your team that you don't want to pick major fights before your heroic is off its cooldown. The last concept we discussed, and the one you will be working on all the way through gold, is informed aggression. Make strong moves while you are more powerful than your opponents. Be less aggressive while on cooldown, and avoid bad fights by communicating your cooldowns efficiently to your allies. Here's a list of heroes I recommend in Silver with great call to action heroics. These have strong, instantaneous visuals. Muradin enters Avatar communicating his survivability. Tychus throws down a turret that starts shooting a giant laser at a single target. Thrall, perhaps the loudest one, throws out an earthquake, which allows him to control a large zone that people cannot easily walk away from. The Phoenix on Kael'thas we showcased. And Malfurion and Lily, while a bit more reactionary in the support role, have a long-lasting heal that will not confuse allies and will press them to push their advantage. All of these are easily stacked with and have limited counterplay options. If you don't see your favorite hero here, it doesn't mean you can't run them in Silver, merely that these heroes will reduce the burden of your execution. ETC is a fantastic tank, but setting up a great mosh pit requires you to watch your teammates who aren't reliable in Silver. Sylvanas' Wailing Arrow is very powerful, but it's too fast. The enemy will be suddenly silenced without your allies having any knowledge that that was your plan. You can cast a mind control, but that puts all the weight on the execution on your fellow Silvers. Jaina has a very powerful heroic, Ring of Frost, that can explode the entire enemy team. However, it is very fast, and it will take a quick reaction for your allies to actually participate in the heroic you threw out. In that case, you may want to go for Water Elemental just to allow that communication to flow easier between confused Silver teammates. Specialists like Zul sometimes have very powerful heroics, but his strong push power and rotations can be easily ruined by his allies who choose to soak alongside him, stop him from doing a double soak, or other opportunities that are available to him in higher leagues. High value heroic casts will carry you through the majority of the Silver ranks. As you approach higher Silver, really work in that value into your basic abilities. As you pick talents, make sure all that text is used to increase your personal impact on the battlefield. There is one other aspect that I want you to think about and start working on as you approach gold: the minimap. Start counting to 5 and look at the minimap. Here, I know my Blaze is only affected by a gank of at least 3 characters. While I'm counting 4 in the bottom, I am not afraid to push on to the enemy's half. Right now, I know that there are 2 down there by looking at the minimap. 3. 4, I am in complete safety. I can now return to the wall. There is nothing Kael'thas can do to stop my push. It would take more power than he has to stop my solo laning ability. So I continue to push the aggression. Minimap goes quiet, you play safe. You're gonna have to put in a lot of work to move your eyes from the awesome middle of the screen action down to just that box in the bottom right corner, where your eyes should be occupied the majority of the match, and certainly while you are laning.